One of the real strengths of cooperatives is the fact that back in 1995, the International Cooperative Alliance agreed what is known as the Statement on the Cooperative Identity. It gave a really clear definition of what a cooperative was, what its values were, and what the principles through which those values are put into practice are. And they're shared across the world. We often say that if you look at any cooperative, you ought to be able to judge it by looking at how those values and principles are put into practice in everyday life. In recent years in the UK, there's been a big discussion and a lot of interest in the concept of social enterprise. And people often ask, where do cooperatives, traditional mutuals and other forms of association fit within that? And the answer really is no one's quite sure, because there's been ambiguity and a lack of clarity around some of that debate. When our social enterprise strategy was launched by the previous government, it talked about businesses with social as well as commercial objectives. They weren't pure charities, but they could be the trading arms of charities. They were businesses and needed to make a return as businesses, but they also had wider social objectives. Now that's interesting because of the breadth of that definition that does cause some difficulties and some challenges. They don't, for example, share those common definitions. So some of those organisations can be democratically controlled, which is really important to us, but others needn't be. Often they're set up by what you could describe as a modern version of the enlightened philanthropist. Other charities, by definition, are governed by trustees that may well not be democratic. So there's a plurality of forms. But I'll give you another example about why this often causes confusion. We've done a lot of work in the UK developing new cooperative models for schools as part of a response to education sector reform. There's a publication by a think tank a couple of weeks ago called Social Enterprise Schools. It advocates that schools should be run by new social enterprises, but that 50% of the profits could be returned to their shareholders and 50% could be used for wider social purposes. In plain words, they're using the language of social enterprise to be an advocate of the privatisation of the education system and saying it should be able to be run on a for-profit basis. And these are where the terms become quite difficult for us, because we've positioned cooperatives as being about genuine community-owned, community control of those organisations, rather than what I think we're in danger of is using some of this language as a veneer to give respectability to some of these less acceptable forms of enterprise that we'll see. So to me, one of the difficulties about the term social enterprise is the breadth that it covers, from some absolutely wonderful and outstanding examples to one where the language is being used to cover up for things that I don't think we would find quite as acceptable.